And we
Good
are
evening, everybody. Welcome back.
Welcome to the Unacceptables podcast. I am Scott, and this is Jay right here beside me. Wow, what a time to be alive, Jay. I think I need a minute to kind of think about this, because the world's elite are gathered right now to tell us about how to live our lives, and I think I might need a minute. Maybe I need a couple of minutes. Let's just roll this video, guys. Welcome. This is stream number, I don't give a fuck how many. Thanks for joining us. Number 5. Yeah, we're on number 5. For those of you that have been in the previous or been a part or watched the previous streams, this one promises to be just as poor as all the other ones. So, and probably another life decision you'll regret at some point. But here, we're gonna roll this first clip. Always, guys, read the ticker down the bottom. Our contact info, all our socials are down the bottom, as well as always the theme of the show, what we're going to talk about, always at the bottom as usual. And here is our first little bit here, which I guess we're going to go with. This is Russell Brand from his Live Free channel with Andrew Lawton of True North News, talking about what's going on in Davos at the WEF Summit. So
the finest brand in England, Russell Brand.
Yeah, there you go. Good job, Jay. All right, here we go. Let's roll this one. We'll be back, guys. Give us a couple of minutes here.
What's it like there? You're having a nice time?
Yeah, it's great. You walk through and everyone's giving you hot chocolate. Today I was given Saudi Arabian hot chocolate. I was given Facebook hot chocolate. I was given United Arab Emirates hot chocolate. There's lots of hospitality, although a little bit of a cold weather for those of us that are not necessarily used to it. I'm Canadian, so I'm good, but some of the others I worry for.
You can't just douse yourself in hot chocolate in an attempt to inoculate yourself against circumstances. Andrew, have you seen anything so far? Like, firstly, I just want to get an idea of what it's like. Is it just like any ordinary conference, or can you see any evidence of globalist skullduggery aside from what sounds like delicious hot chocolate?
I haven't seen the globalist skullduggery just yet, but we're also still getting set up here. And it's a bit like a weird billionaire trade show, because when you walk down the main street, all of these stores, which the rest of the year are ski shops and coffee shops, have all been taken over by corporations that pay a large amount of money just to basically turn themselves into exhibits. You've got Microsoft and Salesforce and Uber and Amazon, and they all just try to bring in politicians and investors into these little pavilions, they call them.
Lovely metaphor for globalization. Little local stores taken over by big corporations.
That's amazing. They just turn them into little temporary little booths, lure you in like you're going to be Shanghai.
Oh man, I love that guy. He's so entertaining to watch. I mean, honestly, he's like, if you guys got to check him out. He's on Rumble, and that's where I recommend checking him out. We will get something.
And you can only see most of his content on Rumble. He does a lot of stuff that he's not allowed to do on YouTube at all. He'll literally say that, okay, I'm going to be on Rumble or on YouTube for another couple minutes, and then I'm switching over to Rumble so that we can talk for real.
Yeah.
And there's a few people doing that now.
Yeah. So this is the time of year where all the global elite, so what I like to refer to as the morally deficient, gather at Davos, Switzerland to discuss how we should live our lives and how the world should operate and how things should go in the world. And I'd like to just open with something quite interesting. Now, all of these global elites arrived in private airliners, private jets. So there's got to be, I don't know, probably 1,500 jets that flew in for this thing. They all had to pay roughly, at least for the private people, not the politicians, they all had to pay roughly about $1 million just to be in this event. So a $250,000 a year, a $650,000 a year membership plus $250,000 just to get into the event. So you got to figure that's just politicians getting into an event for free because they have the rich and the elite that are going to rub elbows with them. In my opinion, they're just trying to save money on lobbying. But that's just an opinion, I suppose. But so I saw something interesting. I'm going to try and bring this up. Give me 1 second here. You guys see in the bottom here. So here's how these people live their lives. They fly in on private jets, and they party it up. And here's what we've got. Just 1 second, folks. Here, let me set this up. All right.
We've got screen share.
There we go. Perfect. So, as there will be those of you that will only listen and not see the stream, I'm going to read this. So, report put out by the Gateway Pundit, and I actually like them. They're pretty good. High-priced prostitutes descend on Davos for high-powered leaders at the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum's Davos summit began Monday. This brought a large surge of prostitutes to the town who are booked into the same hotels as some of the attendees. Imagine that. So they're showing up there in their private jets, and they're already ordering the prostitutes to make sure they're all ready and good to go for the morally inferior,
divorced. Morally divorced.
So this
divorced from morality. Yeah.
This is a report by the Daily Mail here. So the Daily Mail reported the global elite tackling the world's greatest problem, including gender inequality at the Davos summit, are rather fueling a surge in prostitution at the Swiss resort town. Demand for sex work skyrockets each year at the meeting. Imagine that. Every year they do this, right? At the meeting of world leaders and business tycoons who jet in from all around the world to rub shoulders with each other while they tell us about climate change and how we're damaging the environment, by the way. Escorts are booked into the same hotels as high-powered bosses and their employees during the 5-day summit, which starts January 16th. Liana, who is the person we're getting quoted from here, charges around $760 an hour. So about $2,500 for one night, plus travel expenses. One prostitute in Davos gave us more insight to what happens, they say. She made it clear she doesn't reveal who uses her because you don't want to get into litigation with them. So, I mean, that's kind of what we're doing here. We're being led by these global elites. And being told how to live our lives while they fly in with private jets and hire hookers and likely have mountains of cocaine to consume and party it up.
Yeah,
that's a real story. I mean, I'm not making this up, and you guys can search it. So there's that.
There is that.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, and there's going to be all kinds of frivolity with the amount of money that they spend to get there. It's up, we were discussing earlier. It's upwards of $810 million per year for those who want to be a member of the WEF and to go to their annual
810,000
million. Oh yeah, 810,000. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Carry on, sir.
Thank you very much. So like it's an astronomically expensive thing, but of course that's only if you're not a politician. Politicians, they get in for free. I don't believe that their membership's free, but I know that they get into this thing for free. So that's where that goes. Now, one small ray of sunshine, along with BlackRock starting to kind of back off on the ESG financial manipulation that they've been up to for so many years. That's kind of still going on. But in addition, there's only one leader of a G7 nation at the WEF summit this year. Pardon me. In 2022, they had 5. So I would say that as far as optics go, what they're doing is saying, okay, this is really unpopular now. So optically, we can't actually have the president, the prime minister, whoever literally go there themselves. So it says at the very least that there's a whole bunch of people, more people now who are saying that what you're doing isn't cool, which is great. That means there's more of us, which is, for starters, great. The other thing it says is that they're completely scared shitless of Christine Anderson opening up on them in European Parliament for the world to see, because she will rip you a new asshole, as we've all seen many times.
Yeah, I don't think you want to fuck with her for sure.
No.
She's a shark. She's a
Yeah.
pit bull. She's the spirit animal, I think, of Pierre Poilievre in our parliament. Certainly. She's quite the shark, and I love to see her go. She's very well spoken, very charismatic. And look her up, by the way, folks. Look up Christine Anderson in the European Parliament. She gives a lot of talks. Now,
great YouTube channel. She has a really good YouTube channel. I definitely recommend subscribing and following that. We got a this past summer. She sent a Happy Canada Day on Canada Day morning. That came up in my YouTube notifications. So the first thing I got was Christine Anderson saying Happy Canada Day. So that was cool.
Awesome. That's cool.
Yeah.
You know what I find interesting, Jay, is that Klaus Schwab speaks so highly of Justin Trudeau, and he's quoted as saying, he's quite proud of him, and he's quite proud of the fact that he's penetrated most of the Justin Trudeau's cabinet. That's a quote, by the way. We could roll that video if videos worked on this app, but they don't, so we can't. But either way, you can look that up pretty easily. So he's proud of the fact they've penetrated the cabinet, and most of the cabinet members are future young global leaders, or rather young global leaders, or of that program. But Justin Trudeau was not there, and the reason I find that interesting is, like you just said, and what I'm kind of getting to here is that it's bad for the optics, because they now understand that people are getting that, the things that they do and what's going on there is not good. It's bad for us. It means that they're trying to put us into something we don't want, and into an economic situation we don't want to be in, and it means gains for them, and it means perhaps there's a lot more nefarious things going on with them, and how the world's being run, and how media is being run, than we realized before. And I think some of that has been evidenced with the Twitter files, certainly, but I think there's more to come, and I think stay tuned on that, because we've got stuff coming up as well. But I find it interesting too that Chrystia Freeland is there, and she's a member. She's, I believe, the treasurer or something like that, and I think she's there. I think more pitching. She's trying to go for Secretary General of NATO, and
I think
maybe that's why she's there. Well, that's the rumor anyway. That's what I've heard. So I think that's why she's there. She's trying to make sure that she puts in her, because she doesn't give a fuck about Canada or about being in office in Canada at all. It was all just a stepping stone for her. So everybody knows she doesn't give a fuck about us, and never did.
No.
And
global interest from the start. Global interest from the very start.
Exactly. I mean, she's heavily invested and embedded in Ukraine. She has been for most of her professional career, certainly.
No, most of her life.
Most of her life. Fair enough.
She's Ukrainian. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that
she speaks Ukrainian.
Coincidentally, there's a war in Ukraine right now. Anyways. Let's not get off on that subject.
I will report that Mr. Zelensky was not in attendance at the WEF summit. However, his wife was, and she went on right after Klaus Schwab opened day 2, and of course said the very predictable stuff, like our children are doing homework by candlelight and so on, because big bad Russia, and they should be punished harshly, etc., etc. And then she was on right before the Sea Witch too, Ursula, the chair of the European Union. She spoke right after that. I just call her Ursula the Sea Witch, because whatever her von der Hooven last name is doesn't matter to me.
Von der who gives a fuck.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, folks, we had True North at the Davos summit. Andrew Lawton is there, and his videographer, and they did some interesting initial coverage. And I want to show this video coming up, which was a
As
protest.
as
that
an
took place-
example of yeah. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sure,
no, that's okay. Yeah, no, that's okay. As an example of something else later. No, but I want to
Yeah.
show this video. This was the initial arrival of True North. There was a protest already taking place outside of the doors of or the gates of the Davos summit, and I quite find it funny. I hope you guys can see the humor in this clip as well. But either way, here's a clip from True North News. Andrew Lawton in Davos.
Of journalists, global elites, business leaders, politicians are all here in this Swiss mountain town to talk about the things that they believe will solve the world's problems. They talk about this every year, and some people aren't exactly fans of it. Just like when we were here in May, there were a group of protesters that were largely on the left, a lot of anti-capitalist voices calling for climate justice, calling for upending the WEF, that had their own view of what was really going on here, and it was that they needed to do more for so-called climate justice, more to tax the rich. Spoke to one gentleman named Johannes from Berlin who had this to say.
We live in a climate catastrophe and we need climate justice, and climate justice doesn't work with billionaires that just decide whatever they want to do because they don't care about the climate.
Now, how did you get here from Berlin?
We took a bus with 50 people about, and then we walked up.
What would you like them to do? If you could go in there and they asked you what your solution was, what would you want them to do?
Well, at first we have a huge difference between the global north and the global south, and we need to have it more equal at first. Here in Davos, for example, it's way too rich, and way too rich people are here, and we need them to give away money. I don't know how, but we have to do that somehow.
Now, how would taking money from the north affect the climate?
The more money you have, the more CO2 you emit. That's what we know. You have private jets, you have big houses, and so on. And that means they are the problem. And when they don't have any money anymore, they can't spend it on stuff like that.
So if people are poorer, it's better for the climate?
No, it depends on the level of richness. And billionaires emit way too much, while on the other side a lot of people are poor, which are affected by the climate crisis, but they can't do anything against it, so they need the money for it. It's quite easy.
Now, Johannes came from Germany. Other protesters came from as far away as other parts of Switzerland, from the United Kingdom, from Austria. They traveled from all across Europe to protest for climate justice and economic equality. Marlene from Austria said that she doesn't believe capitalism itself is the problem, but also articulated that there's no denying the status quo is not working for ordinary people.
We need to talk about wealth, especially in terms of power and power distribution, and taxation of wealth can actually help redistribute power more democratically than right now, because when you have huge amounts of wealth, you have huge amounts of influence, but you're not democratically elected. Who gives you the right to decide on behalf of everybody? I think the status quo shows that the version of capitalism we have really doesn't help the people and it doesn't help the planet. On the contrary, it's really just a motor for disaster, frankly. The thing, though, is the isms in themselves, capitalism, socialism, communism, whatever ism, they don't help because they pretend like there is one super answer for everything, but it's much more complex than that.
Now, one of the most interesting people I met was not your garden variety Antifa protester. Phil White is a representative of Patriotic Millionaires, a group in the UK of millionaires who want to be taxed more. This is a little bit from my conversation with Phil.
We're campaigning for wealth taxes and reduced wealth inequality in the world.
So are you a millionaire yourself?
I am, yeah, and I'm saying to my government, come and take some more tax from me. You can do more good with it than I can.
Now, as you can see, the talking points you get from these demonstrators, not exactly in alignment with what people on the political right tend to say about the WEF, but it's worth noting that historically a lot of the protests against the World Economic Forum did in fact come from the left, people that thought it was a corporate event that represented conservative interests. Now, I don't think anyone's actually making that point, because the traditional left-right line has been redrawn. It's now about the elites versus the everyman. And even though people in this group may not identify as conservatives, it's interesting how much their main points might actually align with some people on the right who also aren't exactly fans of what's happening at this billionaire Disneyland. For True North from Davos, I'm Andrew Lawton.
It's funny how none of those clips seem to run on time. All right, so there you have it. I found that fella quite amusing. He was trying to describe how the rich would give money to the poor in the South, and couldn't quite put it together. It seemed like he was a bit confused by the whole situation in general.
Yes, well, there's some real oversimplifications about everything from the people on the left, like just the simple basis of not understanding that a market is the best entity to decide what currency is, what its value is, what its worth is, what goods are worth, etc. A market should decide that. You try to dictate that, and you get Soviet Union, 1936 million Ukrainians starving to death. That's what happens when you try to control the free market. You can't. You need a market that's free in order for a society to run properly. And so and that guy just doesn't understand that aspect at all. Now, the lady, she's right for the most part, except for the part about, well, no, she's actually right about all of that, except for maybe that we don't need any elements of communism, for instance. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is that there needs to be a redistribution, and we all, and a lot of more ethics needs to be determined more clearly now that we are in this technological age. A politician should not operate the same as they did in 1940. That's pretty clear to everybody. It's got to change a little bit. Things have to shift around. We need more transparency. And I mean, the main problem and the biggest issue that I have with the World Economic Forum concept at all is that basically it's a way to say we cannot trust people to elect the correct leaders in various nations, and for those leaders of those nations to just govern as they see fit. We have to have a central body that dictates to every government what they will do, and we will call that democracy. When it's just not democracy at all. There's nothing democratic about that. and subverting the voting process altogether by creating mega corporations that then end up running everything. Well, now you've completely subverted voting altogether. So that's not democratic at all either. So it's like, it's not free market. It's not democracy on a geopolitical or a global level. It's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. It's everything that we should have learned about the Soviet Union 100 years ago. And we don't seem to have, or a big chunk of our population doesn't seem to have learned fucking anything from the 60 million fucking people that were murdered by trying to force everybody to be equals,
60 million. It was a greater number than that if you look at what Marxism in as a whole, communism as a whole.
That's just Soviets. That's not including Mao. That's not including about 12 other Chechnya, Romania. There was a lot of Mussolini even, there was a lot of really, really bad totalitarianism in the way worse than the Middle Ages for sure.
And the ingredients of totalitarianism are things like controlling free speech, disarming a population, forcing an agenda, canceling political opposition, jailing political opposition,
forcing people to be in fear 365, 24 hours a day.
Because the greatest thing that they could do whilst having you in fear is provide you with a solution or a rescue or some sort of out for that fear, because then they've provided you with, it's a classic circumstance of what's the psychological term, Jay?
It's a fucking grift. That's what it is. It's a fucking grift.
Fair enough. Either way,
it's somebody pretending to be smarter than they are and telling you that they know better than Nobel Prize winners. That's what it is.
Yeah, fair enough.
Grift. They don't
All
get
right.
they don't get any psychological terms. I'm not even going to say Carl Jung's name when I'm talking about people like that.
It's yeah, no kidding. Yeah, no, don't do that. But it is, in all honesty, folks, it is a psychological ploy. It's psychological manipulation. If you're drowning in the ocean and somebody says, "I'm going to throw you a buoy so that we can rescue you, but the cost is going to be this," you'll take that buoy because you're drowning.
Yeah.
And it's much the same thing, right?
It's neuro-linguistic programming.
All right, Mr. Fancy, whatever the fuck that means.
Brain word programming.
Yeah, no, I get it.
The words
I joke. I think folks have figured out by now that Jay holds the majority of the brain cells in the stream, and I'm just the guy that runs machines and grows food and plays with animals. So there is that.
Different strokes.
Exactly. And I'm okay with it. I like diesel and I like diesel fumes, and I don't give a fuck who knows about it. And that's why I don't like the WEF, because they're trying to tell us that they're going to fly into Davos on private jets and say you can't cook food on a gas stove because it's harming the environment. And that's a big problem for a lot of North America and a lot of Europe, because they all have a lot of people have gas stoves and gas appliances, gas furnaces, and they want to eliminate that. And they're not going to pick up the bill for that. They're just going to implement that, and you're going to be forced to change over to electrical power, which we don't have the grid for, by the way. Totally a different stream. I think I might be getting off on a tangent here, Jay. Our next little bit here is Andrew.
Quickly before you do that,
yep.
I'm just going to say one thing. Here's another interesting thing, because I watched all the live that I could find from Russell's people and from Lawton, etc. And one thing that I noticed from the speakers, and also from the WEF's YouTube channel, because none of this is hidden, folks, really. But one thing I did notice is that they really leaned into Putin, and they're not having a whole lot of green speak as of yet. Not anything like it has been for the last 4 or 5 years. All of a sudden, there's a new scapegoat.
Well, because it has to be that, Jay. It has to be Russia man bad, right? They have to, the fear, I think that there's too much that we can see with climate and climate science that they can't hide. Whereas with regards to Russia, so much is hidden, so much is kept from us, so much is censored that they kind of can hide that. So they can do the Russia man bad thing all they want, and that will create the largest amount of fear, of course, because that comes from fear due to the Cold War, fear of nuclear war, which, I mean, arguably Russia has not done anything like what you would expect a country that was trying to take over the rest of Ukraine would do. They have secured a certain area.
Perimeter.
Yeah, they've secured a certain area that was mostly Russian speaking and basically Russian people that lived in part of Ukraine that became Ukraine, I guess. I'm not sure how that all worked. But the long story short was there was a basically genocide and a very much an oppression going on with these Russian speaking Ukrainians. And Russia felt the need to go and step in and protect them. And, you know, there's something to be said for that. They simply wanted to go in and say, oh, these people consider themselves Russians. We want to protect them. They've done that. Yeah. They have no interest in proceeding any further. They haven't tried to. Now, some people might forecast that they're waiting for, the full on of winter to set in before they continue. It's hard to say what they're thinking right now, but I would say that if that's what their plan is, that's what they're going to do. Nobody's going to stop them. We are now, North America, the West is now fighting, NATO is now fighting a proxy war with Russia. You won't see that covered anywhere in the news, but we are now fighting a proxy war with Russia. Don't let them fool you. And the only reason we're not in full-on war with Russia is because Ukraine's not a NATO member. So,
and we're also bankrupting the next 5 generations of Ukrainians because they're not getting any of this for free. They have to pay this all back to NATO, and they're going to default on that over and over.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, that's okay, because at the end of the day, we're footing the bill. us taxpayers here are footing the bill for that. And when they default, we're still footing the bill for that. So our debt goes up. So we've done a thing that's going to hurt us right now and long term in the pocketbook, and the cost of living will increase astronomically, as it already has, due to this, among other things. I mean, our debt's more than double what it ever was from all other prime ministers, all other governments combined previous to this Liberal government.
The timing's pretty important too, because you know, right now during this election cycle, so to speak, Canada's been shipping money over there via NATO all along, no questions asked, give it right up, and then we find out that we have a deputy prime minister who seems to have her eyes set on a NATO position. And so one can draw that conclusion fairly simply, and like very easily, and just say, oh, well, a lot of tax-paying money just went to the war in Ukraine via NATO in order for Chrystia Freeland to be elected for a NATO position. Let that one sink in a little bit, Liberal voters. Let that one sink in a little bit.
Yeah. At some point, we're going to have to address Liberal voters, and we're going to have to address the Liberal and NDP coalition, but I think that is not today.
No.
We have...
Well, when I say Liberal voters, I mean globally. All the Liberal voters who elected the German Chancellor, you know, the UK Prime Minister, etc. There's a lot of Liberal nations right now.
Yeah, for sure.
I call it the Lempire. You know?
Yeah, the left empire, the Lempire.
Yeah, Lempire.
And
it has.
And I've used that. I stole that. I adopted that from you, Jay. By the way, I took license of that and have used it several times, and people have just looked at me and been like, "The what?" It's
a thinker.
Just keep moving. Keep moving along.
It's a thinker. Yeah, but it doubles too, though. There's a double meaning there because it can also be the Lemming Empire.
Oh, that's a little too deep. Yeah, I get it. No, I get it. I get the reference now, but I didn't pick it up before.
Yeah. Let's all go voting now.
What's going on in the chat, by the way? Let's see what we got going on.
I haven't even looked.
We got people here. We've got Logan in here who's having a great conversation. Erica and oh, hey, there's Heather as well. Is
Heather, Logan, Erica. Interesting.
I don't see a note from Heather here in a while. Maybe she left.
I didn't. It kind of trailed off like you were on a CB radio. Was that a Niner? I heard?
No, that was me trying to do audio effects. You know, trying to add some mystery to the stream.
Putting remixes on it. Yeah.
There you go. All right. You guys stay good. Everybody looks like they're behaving in the chat, so it doesn't look like we're gonna have to kick anybody out today. Luckily, and nobody has sent me nasty emails to me this week with things that I don't want to see pictures of. So that's a good thing. I don't have to read anything nasty or see anything nasty in the stream, and that's always
fantastic. Thanks for coming out, you guys. Thanks a lot. So here's a question, right? We have this big multicultural event. That's what the WEF is, quite multicultural. If there was one thing I would give them, it's that. And in fact, the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates are both represented, and they had a booth. The Saudis had a booth, and it had some very interesting hospitality there, I think. Scott, do you think we have anything related to that at all?
We do, and I quite like this clip. You guys, True North is doing a great job.
Oh yeah. Lawton's home run hitter, man.
You gotta go check them out. I mean, they are the next. They should be our mainstream media in Canada, in my opinion. And if you're not following True North on YouTube, go follow them. Please, we are not in any way related to True North. We just support what they do because they're doing a great job. I'm gonna roll this clip. This is Andrew Lawton tooling around in Davos again. getting kicked out of the Saudi booth. So let's roll this here.
From Davos, Switzerland, I've just been thrown out of the Youth Malchus, which is a pavilion here on the main stretch in Davos, hosted by the Mohammed bin Salman Foundation. Now, this is a Saudi Arabia foundation that is a partner of the World Economic Forum, and their mandate, according to the World Economic Forum website, is to discover, develop, and empower Saudi youth to become active participants in the future economy. We walked in off the street, we're checking out all the buildings here, and we were invited on a little tour. My videographer and I went along just listening. I didn't even ask any questions. And as we neared the end of the tour, which my videographer had been filming just because we're covering everything in Davos, we were approached by someone who told us we couldn't film. And she actually demanded to see the footage that we had taken of just walking around, seeing the tour that they were providing to get the word out about the work they were doing. I'm not sure why they're here if they don't want people to understand what we're doing. Now, needless to say, we didn't turn over any footage, which we were under no obligation to do. We just politely left. But it's a little bit of an odd thing. Why would you be here to try to get your message out and not actually want people who can bring that message to a larger audience to do it? Now, one thing I would point out is that the building behind me, where the foundation is headquartered, at last year's annual meeting was actually by the Saudi government itself. It was the Saudi Cafe, but now it's got the slightly more palatable sounding Mohammed bin Salman Foundation branding. Now, it wasn't a complete loss, though. I didn't leave without getting a free glass of Saudi hot chocolate. So even when you get thrown out of a place, there still is some nice Saudi hospitality for you. From Davos for True North, I'm Andrew Lawton.
What are you guys up to in Davos that you need to keep press, especially independent press, out of your booth? I mean, you're there to display what you're doing, and yet you don't want to allow any filming. I'm very curious as to what the fuck is going on there, because that's really odd to me. Either way, he got a free glass or a free cup of hot chocolate, so that's pretty awesome.
Well, he has a full press pass. They are a sanctioned international news agency. True North now, so that's amazing. He even rolled up on Klaus Schwab at one point, who was having an interview with another journalist there, and so that's great. Kudos to them.
Yeah, he's doing a great job, and you can certainly tell that it's non-biased. He does a great job at being very factual and digging down into the dirt and not being I mean, I suppose he's got a more conservative view, but who can blame him at this point in this political climate for having a more conservative view, certainly.
You know what? I'm going to start a rumor right now that I'm sure is probably true. I bet you Fox News has already approached Andrew Lawton. I bet you they have.
So I don't know about that, but I know Ezra Levant of Rebel News was on Tucker Carlson not so long ago. So I mean, they see us up here. They like not to say that we're not likable as Canadians, but they see us. They see what's going on, and they're aware.
Yeah, particularly Western Canada and people in the South. Are very, very kindred as far as inequality over time, as far as putting up with somebody's snooty attitude all the time. That like there can be an element of that in the United States too.
Snooty attitude. What are you trying to say, Jay?
Well, I mean, sometimes the South gets a little static, and that even comes from me sometimes too. I'm guilty of that from time to time, but Western Canada is kind of that too. Like we're dismissible to the people in the East, right? But that's not to say that there's plenty of people with very traditional, very strong values all over New England, all above the north of the Mason-Dixon line. There's plenty of people with traditional values. There's plenty of red states. There's plenty of really good people up there. So don't mistake me. Don't misquote me on that. Although somebody could just take a quick snip and now I'm fucked. 12 seconds, I'm dead.
Well, that's the leftist the leftist media agenda now. Is you take one part of one thing somebody says and spin it into something incredibly offensive just by taking one sentence and then alluding to something else when that wasn't what they were. You know, it's quite effective. I mean, it's been done a bunch, especially to our friend Mr. Jeremy McKenzie over at Diagolon. By Miss Rachel Gilmore on Twitter, etc. It's quite incredible, and we're gonna actually touch on that. I'm hoping. I mean, I don't know if anybody that is a DAG is watching this or might see this, but I'm hoping we can get a message out to Jeremy. He might want to make a comment in regards to that. I think it's quite ridiculous, but either way. So let's get back to it here, Jay. We have another clip. So this one's the day one wrap up, and so I suppose there's a few things of note. Saw some footage that Mr. Lawton wasn't allowed into certain areas. He went to access certain areas and they refused him, which tells you that they're okay with the certain bought and paid media, the mainstream media they'll allow in there, but certainly not any independent media. Certainly not True North, who knows, who is known to have truthful views and factual views and not fuck around and not be a media outlet you can buy like some of the other ones, like some of the other ones consumed by you people out there.
Fox probably gets the cold shoulder a lot too, I'd imagine.
I imagine they do.
Al Jazeera probably too. Al Jazeera to me is the finest news source, the most bipartisan news agency that exists, I believe, is Al Jazeera. Personally, that's not a popular view, but I think they call it pretty much straight down the pipe. And speaking of which, just briefly, for an example, if anybody wants an example of what will happen and what can happen potentially when these climate initiatives that WEF is forcing onto people go into place, go to Google and check out Sri Lanka and see what's going on in Sri Lanka as a result of attempting to drastically curb fertilizer usage and energy usage in the farming industry. They tried to slam it in there, and the second year they got less than 50% of their annual crop, and there's widespread starvation, and Sri Lanka has been bankrupt since last August. They're working with the IMF to basically, there'll be global receivership, kind of the situation that Puerto Rico once found itself in. So that's essentially the worst case scenario of these climate initiatives that are going on, is that they're being done too fast, and the supply chain and the food production cannot handle the kind of shutdown that they're asking for. In addition to all the other evils, there's simply the fact that it will actually literally murder millions of people outright.
So just before we, so Logan, if you're still in the chat here, I've brought your comment up into here because I'm curious as to what you mean by this. So Logan, can you respond here? Intel Center not wanting full exposure. What do you mean? That's from Logan here in our chat. Just explain in the chat what you meant by that, please, because I'm curious. So
Logan, shout out to Northern Michigan. That's Logan. In Northern Michigan.
There you go, Logan. Shout out to Logan in Northern Michigan. Thank you for joining us, brothers and sisters to the south. We appreciate you for sure. We're all in this together, right, folks? We're all in this together. We don't have the options anymore of creating any more divisiveness than those that are gathered in Davos have already created. We have only the luxury and only the sense of pulling together and finding common ground. Find your friends, find people that are, of like mind and support your ideals. And if they appear sickly and maybe they're having some sort of heart issues, be careful, because they could have been a former cult member you might want to be steering clear of. Just saying that out loud. Okay, so this is here. Let's give Andrew once more. Andrew Lawton, True North Media. I mean, we love these guys, so we'll play him once more. Here's his wrap up from day one. There's a couple of quick little notes in here you guys should pay attention to. All right, so we'll be right back.
3 annual meeting. A lot of the really meaty sessions don't start until tomorrow, Tuesday. Today was more of a ceremonial affair, but even so, they went right headfirst into things by talking about how we can all live climate positive lifestyles.
What is a climate positive lifestyle for you?
Yeah, so I think the challenge is that except for indigenous people who really had this nature positive lifestyle, no? Today we have such a footprint, no? With everything we do. Even if we come with the train, there's always a big footprint in producing this train, in producing the rails. So actually it's not possible in Switzerland to have climate positive or nature positive lifestyle except if you're actively investing into nature. And I think this is what we need, no? We need not just to talk about the footprint, but also the handprint. No, so that's why also I dedicate my full professional life in Parliament, but also I work at South Pole. We try to have a positive impact on the world, and I think this needs to be an ambition that we invest into nature to have again this positive net balance. No.
That was the first discussion to take place at this year's World Economic Forum annual meeting, though much of the festivities today were actually more ceremonial in nature. They held the annual Crystal Awards, where they reward some of their honored celebrity guests for all their work and all their participation in things like climate change and sustainability and all of that. The opera singer Renee Fleming received an award, the actor Idris Elba, and they also gave a big warm welcome to members of the media who are here ostensibly to cover the World Economic Forum. Tonight had a media welcome reception, which I, as an accredited member of the press, was invited to. Mainly, I just wanted to see the spread that was going to be put out for journalists and see if that might be influencing one way or another whether these journalists are prepared to ask the tough questions. Idris Elba and a couple of representatives of the United Nations were there in what was more of a social affair for journalists and the WEF than anything else. Now, as I said, this is just the first day. We've got 4 more days to come, and we'll be carrying all of this with you. Things that are happening in the sessions, things that are happening on the streets outside of Davos, whether it's conversations on the sidelines with various participants or protests like the one that took place on the weekend before this even started. If you have anything you want to see here, do let us know in the comment section. And again, we are here with just my videographer and I. We don't have the giant TV crew team that a lot of the mainstream media outlets do. So if you want to support our work here, please head over to donate.tnc.news, donate.tnc.news. From Davos for True North, I'm Andrew Lawton.
So if you can donate to True North, you should. I have, and because I believe in what they do, and I support, any independent media, certainly True North, that are doing that good of a job, going and putting themselves out there at their own expense and trying to give us the real facts. And they do such a great job. So please, if you guys can, go and support True North Media. And again, we're not sponsored by them. We don't have any kind of partnership with them. We're that's just me personally saying I believe in what they do, and I support them financially, and you should too, because we need to. They don't have $2 billion of funding like the CBC does from the Trudeau government. So
yeah, word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was the wrap up day one on Davos with Andrew Lawton. There's a lot to be said, and I'm going to bring this little comment up here with from Logan in the chat, because he's got a good point here, Jay. So what this says here, I'm just
Logan's a she.
Sorry, my bad. She has a good point here. The Saudi tent kicking people out of the news, or keep kicking people of the news out. They had intel set up and did not want the neighborhood to know what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, Jay, you know probably better than I do what.
Well, yeah, they're all going to have their national. There's going to be lots of national security there. All of these, any politicians that are there, like for instance, CSIS will be there with Chrystia Freeland, and then the Saudi, whatever their black box agency is, will be there wandering around. Oh yeah, like I imagine every single one of those journalists has somebody following them around the whole time.
Yeah, well,
Probably.
certainly CSIS for Chrystia Freeland will be there. They might have one member of CSIS there running some
Yeah.
kind of computer system and such.
I
in the
mean, you
background,
were
and a
saying they
few
brought
members of
some
the
insane
RCMP.
amount of. Yeah, you said they had brought some insane amount of police in there. So I mean, it's not a policing matter. I
Yeah.
think it's probably more
No,
spying,
they
espionage.
yeah, no, exactly. And they brought an insane amount of thugs in there, not police.
Mm.
Let's clarify.
Yeah.
And we're going to touch on
Yeah.
that actually. So while we have a little bit of time here. Let's talk about the next stream before we go to the next clip, so that we can capture everything. We're going to talk about a little bit more about the summit at Davos. I'm sure a few things will pop up between now and Thursday, but primarily we're going to talk about the fact that there are 5,000, I believe, 5,000 armed. Either military or police officers in Davos as a security force. And that, to me, again, I'll ask the same question. What the fuck are you up to that you need 5,000 armed guards? But we'll touch on that on the next stream. I believe there is some merit to actually following that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
that
as soon as you
story.
mentioned it, earlier, I thought like, yeah, we got to get that in there. And one of the reasons why I felt like you did that we should have 3 WEF shows this week, so that we can make sure that we get a chance to cover everything with and give the detail, give it the detail where it's needed, etc. Yeah.
We had, for those of you that have seen our previous streams, we had announced that we would cover the bills that were being tabled and passed in Canada. However, this is something that we can cover next week or in little segments. And this going on in Davos is only once a year. So we would be remiss not to cover it. Certainly while it's happening live.
I don't think Senate is back in session until the 22nd or 27th. So
Yeah,
it's not like we have time to cover it before they go back in.
Exactly. Fair enough. And that's just it. This is happening now, and so that's what we wanted to talk about and cover and break down for you. So our last clip here. Do you want to roll this now, Jay? Anything else you want to add before we roll this last clip and then finish off?
No, I'm good. Yeah, let's roll it
This is the one with Niall Ferguson, guys. So well, here, let's just roll it. You'll figure it out.
Ferguson, why is it you think a lot of the green energy proposals we've seen so far have not really been all that effective?
Well, it's a little bit like economic planning through the ages. If the US government, or for that matter, the European Union, mandates a transition to so-called renewables without thinking through the unintended consequences of that kind of central planning, you get what we've seen in the last 2 years. You could call it greenflation, where prices have soared. In practice, putting a price on carbon is not something that consumers were ready for. So even before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you could see some of the problems playing out. It's very hard to get to so-called net zero. Truth, the world continues to need hydrocarbons, and cutting down the supply of hydrocarbons is just a recipe for higher energy prices. That's not politically sustainable in democracies. So you can see why this enterprise has run into trouble, and I think that was predictable.
Do you think that the problem is the specific goal, or is it that idea, as Hayek wrote about, that you just can't centrally plan something like that as government?
Well, I think the solutions to the problem of climate change or global warming, which I certainly don't deny, will come from technological innovation. It's technological innovation that's made solar so much more efficient. in the last decade or so. The idea that central governments, or for that matter a world government of the sort that some people at Davos dream of, could somehow bring that about, I think is at odds with historical experience. So my sense is that the fears of a climate catastrophe today are a little bit like fears of a population catastrophe back in the 1970s. They're the kind of nightmares of the end of the world that technocrats, educated elites are often drawn towards. My sense is that we will, in fact, gradually transition to more efficient energy. We've been doing that in any case for decades. I mean, if one simply looks at the reductions that have already happened in emissions in Europe and North America, that wasn't because of government mandates. The big problem is still China. If you look at all the increase in carbon dioxide emissions since Greta Thunberg was born, about 2/3 is China, and about 85% of the increase in coal consumption. And nobody here ever has an answer to the question, how do you constrain China? How do you make China honor its pledges? Until there's a good answer to that question, there's clearly not going to be a reduction in global warming.
Imagine that. Punitive measures won't solve a complex problem like that. That's not going to be the answer. That's Niall Ferguson, everybody. That's pretty much the world's foremost historian, top-selling, most respected, etc. Pick up any of his books. You'll be amazed. There's a great documentary on YouTube called The History of Money with Niall Ferguson, who it's a brilliant mind. That's a generational mind that, you know, it's going to be a shame to lose one day, but as long as he's doing what he does, he's an incredible thought leader. So I urge you to follow up with Niall Ferguson if you're ever looking for something to watch on YouTube.
Yeah, for sure. He's brilliant. Another person we can recommend. I think that, folks, is going to do it. We have had fun. This is Tuesday. Thanks for those of you that joined us. We'll be back Thursday with some more coverage of the WEF Davos Summit. Probably likely with more coverage provided by Andrew Lawton, as he is really the only main, or rather independent media source that we've been able to get anything out of, other than Rebel News, who doesn't really seem to have much. So we'll try and stay on top of that as well. But go check them out, Rebel News on YouTube and True North on YouTube. And join us as well. Look at our contact info at the bottom of the ticker. So the Telegram page, join us there. That is t.me Rabbit Hole Guild. YouTube, you're watching us on YouTube, obviously you know how to find us there, and join the guild, and I put that in there as well. It should say join the guild so email us at jointheguild.com. All right, anything else, Jay?
It's join at rabbitholeguild.com.
Oh, okay. Well, fair enough. It should be.
That's the email address. Yeah. It's you got it right on the ticker.
The printing is small, and I don't have my glasses on, so
I'll put it in the description of the video anyway.
But don't worry, with the new Neuralink that they're proposing at Davos, I'll be able to read everything from 14 miles away, so that should be good.
I suppose that's true. Yeah.
All right.
If you need
that's going to do it. That's going to do it for us, folks. Thanks for joining us. We are the Unacceptables. I am Scott. That was Jay. Go fuck yourselves.
Yeah, twice, 2 times.